It's my great pleasure to introduce Amy Cheng Vollmer, Isaac H. Clothier Jr. Professor of Biology, as our keynote speaker. Amy is a long-term friend of St. Joseph's and has lectured here and worked with many of us in numerous ways. Dr. Vollmer earned a bachelor's degree in biochemistry from Rice University and a PhD also in biochemistry from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. After completing postdoctoral research in immunology at Stanford Medical School, she taught at Mills College in Oakland, California, prior to joining the biology faculty at Swarthmore College. At Swarthmore, Dr. Vollmer teaches lecture and lab courses in introductory biology, microbiology, biotechnology, which is one of her interests, and metabolism. She also offers courses in bioethics and general adult learning courses on bacteria and viruses. She is a winner of the Swarthmore College Lindback Faculty Award for Excellence in Teaching and the recipient of the Karski Distinguished Undergraduate Teaching Award from the American Society for Microbiology. She is a nationally recognized expert on microbiology education and the past editor of the Journal of Microbiology and Biology Education. Since 2007, she has served as the president of the Waxman Foundation for Microbiology. Dr. Vollmer's research focuses on the regulation of the response of bacteria to environmental stress and the microbiology in soil and birds. In her laboratory, she has supervised over 70 undergraduate students and hosted 10 non-science Swarthmore faculty and staff. Dr. Vollmer frequently lectures on her research and on teaching, science literacy, and mentoring, among other things, and has published widely on undergraduate teaching and research. We are very excited to hear her keynote speech this morning, Teaching Enjoyably, Liberating Yourself from Unnecessary Constraints, which will be followed by an interactive workshop, How to Turn Our Teaching Headaches into Learning Opportunities for Students. Please join me in welcoming Professor Vollmer back to St. Joseph's.
I just learned this morning of what Usha and Mark have been through, and I can just imagine how supportive this community has been. In memory of her, as well as especially the children of Manchester, would you please join me in a moment of silence? Thank you. Events like this remind us just how privileged we are to do what we do. Before I start, in case you think you're not going to get anything out of this presentation, it's okay. We're skeptics. That's why we're in academics. When you have a PowerPoint show in view and you don't want people to be distracted by the slide, push B and it'll go black. To bring it back, push B again and it'll come back. If you don't like black, W is white. So there's B again. So when Usha asked me to speak here, I was greatly honored because I've been well aware of St. Joe's and its dedication to pedagogy and teaching for a very long time. My first interaction with St. Joe's was actually with Jim Watrous. Many, many years ago, we reviewed a program. And it was my first program review, but it was not Jim's first. And so I want to thank him for teaching me. I've since reviewed about 20 programs. So it was really a pleasure to be trained by one of the best. So thank you, Jim. I've also had the pleasure of interacting with the St. Joe's science faculty for many years in many different capacities. Always been impressed. The only thing I don't like is how long it takes me to get here. But other than that, it's great once I do get here. So thank you for this invitation. I'm also really happy to see the administrative support for teaching excellence. Those of us who are kind of in the trenches know how important it is to have the support of administrators who understand the challenges of keeping up with technology, keeping up with our fields, keeping up with the changing demographic in the classroom, all the while us getting older. So that's one of those tensions that we all deal with. At least it's fair. Before I start, I want to find out a little bit about you. So, and you can raise your hand more than once. How many of you teach or support teaching in the humanities? Okay, thank you. in the social sciences, okay, and in the natural sciences. And if you weren't represented by any of those, just raise your hand now. Okay, thank you. Gives me a sense of who you are. I really want you to think about a small change. If you're here because you're not sure, you can make a big change. This is not like Fixer Upper, okay? I started watching HGTV, I'll admit, during the election season because it was free of commercials until the last week. And then Mr. Toomey hit HGTV. So I got hooked on Fixer Upper. It's not like that. We're not coming in and taking your course and knocking down all the walls. It's a small renovation. It can be building a ramp. It can be a fresh coat of paint. One of the best renovations I did on an annual basis with my kids was on the 1st of July, we would take all of the condiments out of the refrigerator. You know, you're going to have a cookout. You're going to go buy new ketchup and new mustard. I mean, when the ketchup starts to go from red to some other color in your refrigerator, I'm a microbiologist. You really shouldn't use it. And so if all it is taking the condiment shelves and throwing them in the trash and then going out and buying new condiments, even if it's exactly the same ones you used, great. But usually by the time you go to the store, oh, suddenly the ketchup bottle's one of these upside down things, right? And now you can squeeze mayonnaise. Okay, I'll try that. I won't have to set out knives, right? So just that, even if you start with that, it makes you happy when you open your refrigerator, right? So I'm trying to convince you to start wherever you're comfortable. And just because your next door neighbor is doing a wholesale renovation doesn't mean you have to do that. If just a fresh coat of paint or new curtains is what you want to do, that's fine. I think what you'll find is once you start tweaking, you'll get some courage and you'll try some other things. And of course, we know things don't always work. We say this to our students. You learn the most when you fail. I don't wish for anyone outright failure in the classroom, but I've certainly tried things that don't work. I tell the students, well, that didn't work the way I planned. Give me some feedback. Should I just drop this or can I tweak it? And they're really happy to help. When they see that you genuinely care about their learning, they give you great feedback. So, here are the ground rules. I want to be interrupted. If it means I don't get through my material, fine. Please do participate. And I will give biology examples because that's the material I know best. But now I have a sense of the audience is pretty balanced among the different disciplines. I'll try to expand and adapt. And do follow up with me. If you try anything, let me know how it goes. All right? It helps my next presentation because you may hear me say, somebody tried this once and they didn't think it was going to work, and it turned out it was great. Okay, so these are the 3 take-home messages that I have. Know your audience. So I already illustrated that. I believe I asked Usha who's going to be there, who attends this. So I could start framing my talk. You give a very different talk about your own professional work, right, depending upon the audience. You certainly can't dust off your last professional society meeting notes if you're going to speak to a more general audience. Don't be a control freak. We are all here because we're control freaks, okay? We like being our own boss, okay? With all due respect, we really do. It's much different than the corporate culture, believe me. But you are not always driving. And as soon as you turn over the driving to someone else, things can get better. Also, the most important lessons my students tell me that they learn from me are not necessarily the ones that were under my learning objectives or learning goals or even on the syllabus. They are watching how we respond. If the lights suddenly went out, which I really hope they don't, I would still continue teaching. All right. They are learning lessons about resilience, about adaptability, about being inclusive from us. All right. And finally, you've heard this before, but less is truly more. So, think about how you would explain your area of scholarly research or what you do for a living to people in different audiences. Except for your very, very, what I call your tribe, your professional tribe, you're going to have to give a lot more background. I have students envision an hourglass where you start really broadly with background so that they will follow you into the data, right? Which is what you want to give them, into your interpretation of a scholarly work. But if you don't give them background and start immediately at that narrow area, you've lost the audience. Okay. You want to give them little tantalizing pieces. That, remember when E.T. followed the Reese's Pieces that Elliot dropped? Okay? That's how Elliot got E.T. into his closet, into his bedroom. And try speaking to more general audiences. It's a little intimidating, but it's actually really fun. It's really fun. And frankly, I think the more educators and academics get out into the community, the less elitist we seem, all right? And the more we can share what we all know is a rich intellectual life, okay? With some people who actually pay for some of what we do. And I always say to students, unless your grandmother was Barbara McClintock, who was a famous geneticist, you're going to have a really wide, big hourglass. My hairstylist asked me what I do for a living, and she's learned a lot of microbiology over the last 20 years. She says, I wash my hands a lot better, Amy. Well, you know, one of the best lessons you can learn is when we wash our hands, most people wash their palms. I don't know about you, but I don't eat with this part of my hand. This is the part you need to be washing. And that's what my hairstylist says she does now. She goes, I wash my fingers. Good. So, who's in your class? All right? Start with that. Do you have a mixture of majors and non-majors? Great. Don't complain about that. You have a chance to recruit. All right? And there's no zealot like a convert, right? We know that. Are they at the beginning of their training? Are they more advanced? Are you going to take advantage of some prerequisite kind of springboards, or are you starting from whatever they came in the door with? Right. And then what are your expectations and what are the students' expectations? You can poll them anonymously and find out what they expect from the class. And then have you been explicit? I can't be more explicit about this. You need to be very clear what you expect, what you intend to deliver, and how they're going to meet you. What I always say is, meet me 51%, and I'll meet you 51%, and we'll be sure we have overlap. All right. This would be the perfect opportunity for iClickers. I talked to Fran a little bit earlier today, but I didn't want to intimidate people. But iClickers are wonderful because you can get information that people may or may not want to volunteer. So one of my first few slides in introductory biology, which I'll be teaching in September, is what's your class year? There's finite answers to that. And I'm saying to everyone, assume you'll graduate in 4 years, because that's what we're planning on. And, you know, A, B, C, D are the class years. And then you flash the histogram up, and suddenly students say, oh, 30% of the people in intro bio are not freshmen. Okay? But 70% are. Did you go to a private or public school? Were you homeschooled? You know, I give all the, and people can see there's quite a bit of diversity. What part of the world are you from? Are you the oldest sibling, the youngest sibling, somewhere in the middle? You know, just kind of general, just so they're used to kind of clicking in. And it's kind of fun. You know, if I'm too slow at showing the histogram, they'll go, show the histogram, we want to see. Right, so they're learning about themselves. They're learning about the people they share the classroom with. Okay. I asked them, what kind of a learner are you? Are you a visual learner, an auditory learner, a kinesthetic learner? I never heard of these things. That's up there. What kind of science classes did you have in high school? Are you the first from your family to attend college? Okay, we have a special kind of celebration about that. Because in every family, somebody, 1 generation, 2 generations, 3 generations back, had that kind of courage. We celebrate that. Okay. So you give, it's great information for us, teachers, but it also lets the students get to know each other in a way that's It's pretty simple. And they get used to using these clickers. All right, so what I do is I give out an index card. On the lined part, I say, tell me something you'd like me to answer in lecture. And on the back, I say, tell me something you'd like to learn in the laboratory. I especially do this in my microbiology course. I take those cards and I ask the administrative assistant to just type what she sees, front and then back. And then I map that onto my syllabus. I don't show them my syllabus till the second day of class. And for the questions that I can't address, if they want to know about cancer, they really should be taking cell biology and not micro. But what I tell them is, when I talk about viruses and when I talk about the immune system, I will talk about cancer, but I won't get into it in the kind of depth that you might prefer. Yes? Well, so intro bio is 125. Micro is with 5 sections of lab. Micro is 24 to 30. And then I have an advanced honors seminar that's 12 people. And I use iClickers in all classes. Okay. Yes? Yes. Yeah, you get a program. It doesn't take up very much room on your computer. You have a home mothership that you connect with a USB to your laptop. Students, we don't assign them and they don't have to buy them. We just have a bin. They pick them up when they come in and they drop it off when they leave. And we have rescue battery changers so that they can change the batteries. But it saves all the data for you. It's fantastic. Okay? You learn a lot, but not only that. Let's say I was teaching micro, I had 30 students, and 25 of them wanted to know about antibiotic resistance. Well, guess what I'm going to use as an example many, many times throughout the class? I'm not going to wait to the antibiotic resistance days on my syllabus to start talking about it. I'm going to talk about it when I'm talking about genetics and evolution and metabolism and ecology, because I know they're interested. And it's a way for them to understand that I'm customizing my lectures for them. It also gives me an opportunity to kind of tweak my lectures so that they're not stale, right? It's those stale condiments we want to get rid of. So I compiled the list, correlated with the syllabus. Okay, it's amazing how much you learn. By the end of the first week of class, I have a real sense of who's there and what interests them. Comparing that to the minute before I walked in the first day of class, I don't know about you guys, I still get nervous. And part of the nervousness is I don't know who they are. I haven't learned their names yet. But you get over that and you start moving ahead. And you're not teaching an anonymous crowd of people. You're teaching people for whom you know something about where they come from and their interests and what might be driving them. I really don't like this bleacher aspect. Okay, this is the I'm going to watch how other people play this game. I try very hard to invite them onto the playing field, even if it's for a short period of time. You've all been to those baseball games where during the inning changes they have a little relay race, or they have, especially I live in Wilmington, so the Wilmington Blue Rocks have a whole curriculum of stuff in between innings. Right. That gets the crowd involved. All right. You wish you were there stacking the hamburger or whatever is doing that relay. So even in a very large classroom, I invite them to participate. And once you participate, you don't want to go back up in the stands. You want to be on the playing field. And that's what we want. We want participants, not spectators. And what I tell them is, I don't know where you went to high school, but at a place like St. Joe's or at a place like Swarthmore, you're being taught by the people who are still actively playing. Okay? When you think about a sports commentator, okay, I love Al Michaels, but he didn't play. But he's a great describer. But the person I really miss is John Madden. He's the one who said, listen, when you get hit like that, if it's 70 degrees, you just shake it off. If it's 40 degrees, it hurts for days. All right? Al Michaels couldn't tell you that. John Madden wasn't playing anymore. Okay. But those of us who are still playing, we're authentic. all right? And so learning it from us makes those kids want to join us on the playing field. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so this is my little icon right now for talking to your neighbor, all right? So I'd like for you to talk to your neighbor about one of these following topics, all right? Maybe start at the top. What's your area of research and why is it difficult for people to understand? What would be the hook that would have people pause and eavesdrop on your conversation? And have you ever done this before? And if so, share that experience. So I'm gonna let you talk to each other. If you're not sitting next to somebody, turn around and talk to somebody. All right, now in the interest of time, I'm gonna have to interrupt you. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm actually not sorry. You can imagine that this is the beginning of a conversation that might resume again during the break, all right? Do you actually want the conversations between your students to stop when the bell rings? No. You want to seed those conversations, interrupt them, and believe me, I just gave up control and got back, right? So you want to seed the conversations, and as you're wrapping up, say, hey, let's continue this later. Let's sit next to each other next to the picnic and continue this, right? Or let's talk during the break. This is what you want to get started, all right? I've invited people onto the playing field. You're no longer up in the cheap seats, right? Maybe you're just standing on the sidelines, but you've come down from those bleachers, all right? And I do this in a big lecture hall like this that's packed, all right? So, and what I saw, which was really nice because you guys, had drank the Kool-Aid, you moved, right? You went and sat next to each other, you turned around. In my classroom, especially early on, I would be down in the audience pushing people together, okay? So, how many of you do this already? Okay. How many of you think you might try it? All right, good. Good. If that's the only thing you try, you're going to be happy. The students will be a little puzzled at first. But I use a little icon. I'll have a different one in my workshop. And as soon as that comes up, that kind of tells you, you're going to need to start talking to somebody. Okay. Context is everything. The Associate Provost started us out today reminding us of the context. All right. Sometimes we're kind of in the weeds. Especially if we've just been through a pretty bad commute and we just get in our office and it's like, all right. From time to time, it's good to kind of pull back and remind ourselves of the privilege that we have and the responsibility that goes with it. We are entrusted with the minds of the next generation, right? They're going to face problems we can't predict, just like we're facing problems that our teachers couldn't have even imagined. Our capacity to do that comes from all the interactions we had, both formal and informal. So from time to time, context is important. I have a colleague who, on 9/11, she was a young assistant professor, and she didn't think she could hold it together in the classroom, so she didn't say anything when she walked in at 11:20 to start her class. Last year, when the incident happened in Paris, she was speaking in an intro bio, and she took the time. Even though she didn't hold it together, she took the time. And she said to me afterwards, I always regretted not saying anything on 9/11 when I walked in that classroom. And not that I wished for another opportunity, but I told myself if there were ever another opportunity, I would start the class with that. It's okay if they see us fall apart. We're human. It humanizes us because sometimes they actually don't think we're human. You can talk about the political context without being partisan. I know that's a challenge these days. I hold myself to that challenge because I definitely have my opinions. But science is political. We get our funding through politically motivated activities. I always tell the story that cancer research did not have a lot of funding until Betty Ford and Happy Rockefeller, the first and second ladies of this country, both came down with cancer while their husbands were in office, right? It's a fact, right? There are all kinds of other contexts that are important. I would say this, when you're teaching, particularly when something is difficult or very abstract, find a way to connect it with the students' lives. If you can do that, They will be willing to do the tough intellectual work because they'll want to understand how it affects their lives. And you launch them on their own journey. Their learning won't stop when you finish that unit in the syllabus. They'll keep going. Years and years later, I've been to alumni events when a student will come up to me and say, you probably don't remember me, I went on into political science, but I took introductory biology from you, but you talked about antibiotics or something, and I remember those lessons because I use antibiotics all the time, and I use them correctly. They don't share them, don't dump them down the drain, all those things. So I thought, oh, great, somebody was listening. You can always relate it to the things that young people care about. Older people care about this too. Sex, food, music, art, and movies. I will have to say that I was so glad when Star Wars got new blood, because I have some great Star Wars analogies that I was starting to mothball, and I pulled them back out. My son just showed me a presentation he did. He's a music theorist, and one of the themes he used was the Harry Potter theme music. It was a great example, because even if you haven't read the books, everybody's heard the theme music. The beautiful, the weird, the grotesque. These are when you want to highlight things, you want something to be memorable. Think of the things that are most memorable in your training. There was a wow factor in some manner, okay? Use that to kind of punctuate the point you're making. And then what is the hook? All right? Do you want to know how life started on Earth? Do you want to think about how the first cell ever formed? Yeah, okay. Well, we'll get to that in November. Okay. But it's kind of like reading Anna Karenina, right? You start out with the people's names, then you realize every Russian has a nickname or two. I made a whole glossary before I realized in the back of the book there's like 10 pages of glossary, all right? Or Gone with the Wind, you really wanted to know who Scarlett was going to end up with, but you know, unless you don't do this, read the back of the book, right? You follow all the way through because you want to know what's happening. So what I tell them is, I'm going to start out with some things that are pretty pedestrian, but the plot's going to thicken. Just stick with me. So here's one of my wow factor slides. You don't have to know anything about biology, okay? But when something happens at a rate of 850 somethings per second, it's fast. It's fast. It's mind-blowingly fast. All this time we've been talking about enzymes, and students are kind of like falling asleep, and you say they're fast, and you say they facilitate reactions and make them happen more quickly. And then you show this slide. Things that are happening, molecules that are coming together and forming, so basically DNA copies itself in bacteria at this rate, and in you and I at this rate, because our chromosomes are more complicated, so you have to unfold them and unravel them and then wind them back up. But still, 50 anythings per second is fast, right? I know this young kid who can burp the alphabet, right? I don't know how many seconds that is, but that's 26 per second, let's say, right? Or my niece knew how to say the first 100 digits of pi, which I don't know how that's ever going to help her do anything, but she could say it in a minute. All right, but this is really kind of mind-blowingly fast. And so now, the next time I talk about an enzyme, I'll say, you remember I told you they were fast, right? And they're going, oh yeah, now I know what you mean by fast. Okay, so you use it to punctuate what you're talking about. Here's another, how much energy does a single E. coli cell need, all right? And we throw around numbers like, well, if you eat one glucose, you get 36 or 38 ATPs. And ATP is like the energy currency of the cell. And nobody cares. It's like having 36 bucks. Okay, what can you buy? Well, depending on what's for sale, almost nothing. But when you start talking about millions and billions of ATPs, now you're suddenly Bill Gates, right? Or Warren Buffett. I guess for our students it would be Bill Gates. And that's what it takes just to keep one simple cell humming and being prepared to become two cells. Because the whole point of biology is that any one cell wants to become two, right? That's kind of why we're here, right? If you think about it. So again, Now, when I talk about ATP, they realize I'm not talking about numbers like 36. I'm talking about numbers with just a whole boatload of zeros. And that when you're eating a piece of chocolate cake, all right, you're ending up, if you burn it, not like I do, but like young people do, you're going to end up with a lot of energy. And then we talk about athletes carb loading, and I say, how many of you are performance athletes who carb load, and the swimmers raise their hands, and the marathoners raise their hands? You get them engaged. What about those of you who perform musical instruments? You know, how do you sustain yourself? Oh, I eat a banana before I perform, right? You engage them in this process. Well, why don't you find out how much glucose is in a banana, and we'll figure out if that's a good source of energy. Turns out it is. So my ATP story goes like this. And this is where I just was so happy when Star Wars came back out. My husband thought I was kind of insane. I said, you don't understand. I'm going to be able to use this. In Star Wars, there's Darth Vader, you know, the evil character. But before he was Darth Vader, he was Anakin Skywalker. And when he was a little boy, he was kind of obnoxious. But one of the things they learned about Anakin Skywalker is he had more what in his blood than anybody else in the known history of the Earth. You remember? Midi-chlorians, okay? See? All right. Okay, and just because I'm mixing my metaphors, 10 points for Gryffindor. All right? So then I say to students, where do you think George Lucas got the word midi-chlorian? Now, I got to tell you, I've just finished lecturing in intro biology about mitochondria and chloroplasts, okay? And they are the seats of ATP production in cells. And so I let that sink in, and I was just talking to my son last night. I said, you have to be comfortable with silence. You have to be more comfortable than your students are, because then you'll wait for the answer. I said, all right, if Anakin Skywalker had more midi-chlorians than anybody else, and the force was strong with him, what's the force? And you wait for it. And you wait for it. And the answer is ATP. And somebody in the audience will go, ATP? And I'll say, a little bit louder, please. ATP. I'll say, and they're all buzzing, and I'll say, okay, may the force be with you, class dismissed. That little lesson, all right, is years after I've said it. Somebody comes up to me at an alumni event. You don't know me, I was a history major, but I remember the force was ATP. Great. Great. All right. Grossology. If you're looking for punctuation, there's the science of really gross things. I don't know what non-scientists can use, but I'm sure you can figure out, like, I don't know, beheadings or massacres or whatever Henry VIII did to all of his wives. I mean, there's you know, morbid poetry, and there's, you know, art forms that, you know, there's memorable things. Again, it's punctuation, all right? So what my students tell me, and you've got to think this is true, they don't really need to come to class if all you're going to do is read them the textbook. St. Joe's has a huge online presence, right? They could just stay home in their pajamas and learn. What they don't get from those books is stories. Okay? Stories about how you encountered a problem, how your knowledge of some couple of esoteric things helped you solve a problem like MacGyver does. It's the stories that make it memorable. That's why they come to class. I hear students going, I missed Tuesday's class. What stories did I miss? Oh. You know, she told us all about this guy who couldn't speak, who mumbled a lot. You know, they remember these stories. All right, that's what we have as scholars. We're full of those stories. Some of them come from our personal lives, but some of them come from the people we know. And I think it takes the time to tell them. At first, students are going, is this going to be on a test, right? And by the way, before you do this, here's what I tell them when they ask me, what do we have to know? I'll say, oh, I'm going to tell you, okay? You ready to write it down? I'll even spell it. Everything. If you're going to be a neurosurgeon, which when they're intro bio, they all want to be neurosurgeons, you open up the patient. They don't look like the textbook. You don't get to go out to surgery waiting and say, I'm sorry I can't do this surgery. Your father or mother doesn't look like the textbook, right? You have to scramble right then and there. You have to figure out all the things you know. You're going in to resect an ulcer, and you find a tumor. You suddenly look up and say, call pathology, call oncology. We need this. Okay? You scramble. All right? Life isn't about knowing what's going to come next. Life is about being prepared for the unexpected. All right. So, share with your neighbor a story you were told in class. How long ago did you hear it? Why is it so memorable? Have you told it to others? Go. All right, I'm going to interrupt you again. I can see just how engaged you are, though. I'm watching all the arm gestures. There's a lot of this. There's a lot of this. I don't know what's going on, but there's a lot of this. So clearly, you have these memories. And your class should be a place where students build these memories, all right? And if it's not, find the time to do it. You can't teach everything. Let it go. Let it go. You can't teach everything. Let it go. This is something I actually tell students. Many students through high school were driven. They got in the back seat in a big stretch limo. Somebody drove them, right? They didn't actually have to drive. And what I tell students is, not only are you driving, this is manual transmission. You're going to have to use both your feet, and you're going to have to supply the steering and the power. I'm your navigator. If you have a flat tire, I will help you fix it. I may say, oh wait, take this scenic turn out. I want you to see this vista. But the journey is theirs. All right. Now, some of us have kids, and some of us remember those times when we were driving with them and it wasn't always pleasant. All right. And so that's letting go, a little bit of control. But ultimately, there's no substitute for experience for a driver. And so you have to be willing. Maybe you've got one of those cars that's got a set of brakes on your side. Okay, all right, that's fine. Maybe when you're starting out, that's what you do. But you've got to turn over the driving to them. Yes? You just don't drive. You just get out of the driver's seat. And you are patient. And they're saying, why aren't we going anywhere? We're going to be late. And you'll say, want to drive? You have to outweight them. Okay? It's excruciating. And you can incentivize them, absolutely. You know, it's like ET. You start out with little Reese's Pieces, just small steps. Okay? You want to drive it around the block? You want to back it out the driveway? You got to get them used to being at that seat. All right? Sometimes when I give talks, people say, oh, well, you have Swarthmore students. Believe me. Okay? It's all the same. Okay? Some of them have been driven. Some of them have been helicoptered in. All right? So, but I show this. I show this, and I say to students, you're in the driver's seat. How fast are we going? Depends on you. If you're lost, I'll help you find your way. I'll be your GPS. But I'm not driving. We're out of gas? Okay. First time, I'll help you. Second time's your problem. All right? It's a very different perspective for us. We've got to buy into it, and they'll buy into it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay. No, nobody's going to die anywhere if you don't cover anything. Because first of all, you can't cover everything. So if you want them to do an analysis of two major areas of thought, okay, instead of laying it all out for them and having the categories, I'd like for you to analyze this in terms of history, in terms of gender, in terms of, have them say, if you were going to analyze this, what would be the levels of analysis? And I often have students help me develop a rubric. So if you're going to do a presentation, content is 65%. The other 35% is delivery. What do you think delivery means? Well, how good the slides are, okay? Volume, eye contact. They help me decide what that looks like. Now it's not a mystery when they say, how come I didn't get very many points? I said, well, you read your notes. That's not delivery, that's reading. Okay? So engage them in the process. It's scary at first for them, but it also gives them a feeling of some power. Power is to be shared, okay? Every student's journey is unique. Our assignments provide the mechanism by which they go on these journeys. Hey, I heard New York City's really exciting. Oh, let's go. Okay. How are you going to get there? Oh, I don't know. Well, you want to help me figure it out? Right? You've given them the motivation to want to go to New York City. There's this great place called Italy, right? There's the MoMA, right? There's Times Square. Hopefully that driver's not going to come back. But the point is, okay, yeah, I want to go. All right, here's the keys. All right. They're not used to that. Okay? Hopefully that won't happen to you, but if it does, you'll be the one calling AAA. Right? Try to give up that control. Open-ending doesn't mean no planning. Open-ending actually means thinking of all the possibilities where students might go. You have to be prepared if you have a lot of Q&A. You want to share those learning objectives and rubrics. Having students write an exam question. I show them Bloom's taxonomy. Write an exam question that looks at lower level Bloom's learning, middle level Bloom's learning, and advanced critical learning. Write a question with 3 parts, and write the key. They bring it to class. Let the person next to you take your exam question, and then grade it. Once they've been through that exercise, they then realize how difficult it is to write an exam question and how difficult it is to grade. Well, but she didn't say what I wanted. Well, but did you ask what you thought you asked? Well, not really. Okay. She came up with an answer I hadn't thought of. Welcome to my life. Right? Now do you realize for a 3-page exam why my key is 14 pages? All right. Self-grading, peer grading, fantastic. And then after they do the grading, I usually ask them for a check, check plus, or check minus. All right. Did you do everything I said? And that's pretty okay, check. Were you really missing something? Check minus. Was this really an extraordinary answer? Check plus. They're actually quite good at self-grading. Yes? After lecture, not before. And here's why. I don't know what I'm going to get through. Okay? I really don't know what I'm going to get through. And so you need to come to class and take notes. I number all my slides. I haven't done it today because you guys are professionals. I number all my slides, and I say, write the slide number down, and then after lecture, go back and look at the slide with your notes and enhance your notes. The sooner you do that, the more of your short-term memory can help you. If you wait a week, that short-term memory will be gone. And so what I encourage them to do is get into study groups and say, okay, slide 1, what do you got? Well, I got this. Oh, well, I heard this. Well, let's look at the slide. Oh, yeah, what's that curve, right? And they come up with a really amazing set of notes. I tell them, take notes in class in one color pen, and then when you add to it, use a different color pen, and just show yourself how much more you get out of revisiting that. That in and of itself is a lesson. Students say, I'm not in biology anymore. I still go over my notes all the time. Great, lifelong learning. You know, after high school, they think that what they learn in your class, they can't use in another class because some territoriality issues going on in some schools, right? I'm saying, do you do multiplication anymore? We're not in the 3rd grade. You know, please use all of your, Dr. Vollmer, I couldn't answer that question because I couldn't remember if I learned it in microbiology or biochemistry. He was a big 6'2". I grabbed his shoulders and I shook him. I said, what's the matter with you? Don't think like that. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know where that comes from, but we got to get rid of that. Okay? You have to be nimble. Okay? Everybody in the business world is nimble. Nobody's more nimble than we are. We scramble all the time. Those of us who teach labs, oh my gosh. It's like when you're cooking you run out of salt. You scramble. Okay? You just do it. Students are watching. Okay? You're a model of resilience when they watch what happens when things don't go as planned. Students are still talking about the fact we had that huge power outage about 3 years ago. We had 100-foot extension cords we ran from generator-backed. We had like 12 generator-backed outlets. We got flashlights. We did microscopy using flashlights. Biology taught classes that semester, that day. It was awesome. I had a student come back and visit me, and I said, she was a B-minus student. I said, how are you doing? She goes, well, there's a real difference between Swarthmore and the real world. I said, tell me what it is. She said, well, first of all, there's no syllabus. I said, yeah. Nobody welcomes you to work and says, oh, hello, we're on page 1 today. Right? And the second thing is the exams are every day. Yes! I said, you are going to do fine. For students that we're bringing in the summer to give them some acculturation to a college atmosphere, often first-gen students and students from under-resourced communities, what I tell them is, we're just giving you a slightly longer on-ramp. By September, you've got to merge and travel with everybody else. But instead of giving you a California on-ramp, which I don't know if you've been to California, but they're about this long, we're giving you, or a Schuylkill on-ramp, I guess is the one you guys can all, we're giving you a Kansas on-ramp, right? That goes for half a mile before. And you can gauge your speed, and you have plenty of time. So that's what we're doing. Okay. Hello. Complete this sentence. Yes? They work. We stop in the middle. We hand out strips of paper and have them put them in order. We do all kinds of things. No, it depends. Some people do write for a minute and turn those things in. You know, what was the most unclear thing about the lecture and turn those things in? Most of it's just to get them to interact with the material. Most of it's not graded. Most of it's not graded. We don't grade the clicker questions. We give them a point for coming to guest lectures. They sign in. They get a point, and they can come up to 6, so they can get 6 points. After that, guess what? It just becomes a habit. Okay, so we'll give them points for things like that. Okay, complete this sentence. It's not what we say. What else? That's how we do it. What we show. Okay, so it's what we do. It's what we don't say. It's how we say it. It's what students hear. You know you said 10 words. You ask them what you just said. You'd be amazed at what they think you said. Okay? This sometimes happens in marriage counseling too, but it happens in the classroom much more often. Right? They don't actually listen very acutely. Here's the other thing. This generation, they're used to visual inputs galore, but their observation skills are lacking. Right? You've seen that YouTube video of something happening and a gorilla runs across the back and half the people don't see the gorilla running. The other thing is, students are equating information with knowledge. If I can look it up, why do I have to know it? Okay, do you want to wake up in the middle of your surgery because the anesthesia ran out and see your surgeon Googling gallbladder? Right? There's a controversy now about whether or not it actually takes you 10,000 hours of practice to master something. But this is where you talk to students. If you're an athlete, if you're a performer, what's really important about your performance? Practice. Okay, if you're a student and the exam is the performance, what do you have to do to have a good performance? Practice. All right? And most people don't practice alone. They practice with other people, and they get feedback, right? So meet them where they are. St. Joe's has fantastic athletes. You're always on my ladder every year that you're in the 64, because I'm a big fan of the coach. Big, big fan. So meet them where they are, all right? Don't invent something they never heard of. Make it personal for them. If it's important, say it more than once. People have figured me out. She said it 3 times. It's probably going to be on a test. I actually said it 5, but I only heard it 3 times. Say it a different way. Or have them say it a different way back to you. Demonstrate it. Have students put it into their own words. I'll say, if you were going to write a tweet about today's lecture, what would it look like? 140 characters. You really have to know something to put it down into 140 characters, our commander-in-chief notwithstanding. Use different modalities of learning. Have them sing it. I had a student say, that was such a really interesting lecture. I wrote a poem about it. I said, would you share it with me? I said, can I post it on the Moodle site so that other students can see it? And then a student saw it, and he goes, I made it into a song. And so I let the 2 of them perform it. It was awesome. You know what? Students are going to remember that concept just because they learned it in a different modality. Okay? I'm not going to take the time to do this, but think of a time when you learned a lesson that was not on the syllabus. Why was it important? What were the circumstances? I'll bet you $20 it was personal. Okay? And that's why it was powerful in memory. Okay? When I started my teaching career at Mills College, Darrell Bowers, who was a senior faculty member, said to me, oh, congratulations, Amy. You know, the most important thing you can decide when you teach is what to leave out. And I was completely ignorant. And I smiled and said, oh, okay. I had no idea what he's talking about. I will tell you that every year I teach less content. And every year, I teach better. What I'm teaching is I'm teaching students fundamentals and then how to think for themselves. I'm not teaching students to have a recital. I'm teaching students who can sight read the heck out of life, because that's what life is. It's sight reading. It's taking your fundamentals and applying it to something you've never seen before. How many days have you had where you came in and it happened just the way you expected? Raise your hand. Yeah. Okay? We scramble. And how do we do that? We have a body of knowledge and we apply it to this completely bizarre situation. That's the future we're preparing our students for. I have a bunch more slides, but it looks like I'm coming up on a time constraint. So I'm going to stop right there. We're going to take a little bit of a break, and then we'll have another workshop. All right. Thank you very much for participating.